Hi, folks. I wanted to give you a little bit of Hamlet background information and a little bit of summary. And I thought it might be best to do it in a screencast so you can listen to it at your own pace. And I will attach the PowerPoint or the slideshow as well if you want to hyperlink them to your humanism notes. And again, I'm not going to go through every single slide or every single point because it would take way longer than Screencastify will allow me to do. But again, hopefully it's enough of an overview that you can listen to over the course of the weekend so that you come in with hopefully a stronger frame of reference for Hamlet as we start reading. So a couple of just historical pieces. It was written by Shakespeare in the 1600s, although it is actually born out of a Scandinavian legend written, I think the earliest version was the 13th century. It is the first of Shakespeare's tragic plays. You've already read the others. You have read Romeo and Juliet and you have read Macbeth. And arguably, Hamlet is his most mature play with regard to the thematic topics that he deals with in terms of betrayal, revenge, a diseased body politic, a damaged government, and the gender relations that get implied there. Side note that Shakespeare, ever the actor, always writes a little part for himself in all of his plays. He was the apothecary in Romeo and Juliet. I believe he was the drunk in Macbeth, Act 2. And he wrote the part of the ghost of Hamlet's father for himself. So again, even the earliest accounts of the Hamlet legend dealt largely with this notion of the appropriate line of succession in royalty. It dealt with the notion of adultery and murder and the things that we do to gain the upper hand, whether it is absolutely politically or within the context of a relationship. And our basic plot, and you will recognize this if you have seen The Simpsons, you'll also recognize this basic plot if you've watched The Lion King by Disney. So before our play begins, we have old Hamlet, the father, who is the king of Denmark, and his son, Prince Hamlet, who is our main character, is away at school. College, if we want to put the 21st century equivalent there. So King Hamlet gets into a fight with King Fortinbras. So Denmark and Norway are at each other's throats. And King Hamlet kills King Fortinbras in a duel and is able to take the Norwegian land. So as King Hamlet is ruling over Denmark and has taken Norway, he dies under mysterious circumstances. We find out later that it is murder. And within this time, old Hamlet is murdered. 2 months pass. Within those 2 months, Prince Hamlet is sunk into a deep grieving process. He can't hop a plane to come back from school. He's in France and he's got to sail, and he ends up not getting the throne, though we know from the line of succession it should be him. Old Hamlet, the dead king, his younger brother has usurped the throne, so he has subsumed the role of King of Denmark as the younger brother. And he has also married the widowed queen, which of course makes Hamlet a little bit suspicious. This all happens before the play even begins, before Act 1, Scene 1 is opened. When you open Act 1, Scene 1, Hamlet, the prince, has returned to Denmark, and he's very dissatisfied with his uncle and his mother. And so is the rest of the world, because we are also starting to see the appearance of a ghost who looks stunningly like Hamlet's father, the dead king. And that is where we begin our play. So as you can see, it already sounds like a Scandinavian soap opera, or any other soap opera for that matter, because we already have these notions of murder, betrayal, adultery, on top of a bunch of emotions filtering out here. So it is already complex in its nature, and it continues to become more soap operatic as we continue. And so in this slide, you'll see kind of the major ideas that we focus on here. I've mentioned these recurring motifs of betrayal and madness and revenge and so on. Our biggest kind of thematic focus really is this idea of appearance versus reality, this notion that we as people, individuals, and we as a society can put on a very pretty face. We can present very specific sides of ourselves, but there can be a whole boatload underneath that people don't see. We talked about this the other day with the notion of the iceberg. We show only part of ourselves to people. There's so much more below the surface that they may never know, or that we may choose not to tell them. Which begs the next thematic idea, this notion of trust. Can we really trust anybody? Or are things like loyalty and honesty just words we throw around? So those are kind of our biggest ideas, and we see those two really big ideas filtering out in a series of ways. We have a fairly intense political commentary in this play. We have a pretty significant commentary in terms of relationships and how even in the context of what we assume is an intimate relationship, there is still a lot of potential for betrayal and suspicion. We see that in the relationships between parent and child and between significant others and romantic partners. We see this also filtering in terms of friendships. So we really start to deal with significant relational issues in this play. We also deal with, as we talked about in the anticipation guide, the notion of consequences. The idea that every action we take has a consequence. Every lie that we choose to tell may have a consequence. That everything has a consequence and can put a human in a position to behave immorally or vengefully or reactively. And that creates our significant characters, especially our protagonist, Hamlet. He is arguably one of the richest characters that we've ever analyzed. And those of you who are a little bit snarky and sarcastic are actually really going to like this guy. The characterization of Hamlet is very, very intelligent. He is the thinking man of the time. Previous to this, the heroes of the plays and texts were painted as very macho, for lack of a better term. They relied more on their strength. And Hamlet ushers in the evolution of a new hero. He is the thinking man. He is highly intelligent, very sensitive, more like what I think we see in today's world, in many cases. And Shakespeare really characterizes this thinking man through Hamlet's language. The character is very intelligent, and you will see this in the way he uses words. He's very sarcastic and snarky. And again, the use of his own language is very evident. His quick wit, his intelligence is very clear. We also see somebody who's very emotional as a male character, which wasn't typically portrayed well in that time. So Shakespeare really does create a new archetype here in creating our main character of Hamlet. And what you will see, folks, is in the following slides, I have bullet point summaries for Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, Act 4, and Act 5. Not because I love the spoilers, but honestly because I think it does help frame you as you read this text. It is complex. There are a lot of questions and a lot of things where you're going to read it and say, oh, did I actually read that? Or I want to make sure I understood it. So hopefully this gives you a baseline for plot. And as we read, we'll work together to navigate this in this kind of digital hybrid format. But I do hope that this gives you a bit of a frame of reference, and hopefully as we meet up over on Monday, we'll be able to use this as a launch pad as we begin your text. So I hope that you have a great day. I hope that you have a safe weekend, and I will see you on Monday. Thank you. Stay safe. Make good choices.